On your right, your number 5 overall seed against Anneliese, Faustino. On your left, it's Miracles versus Eldrazi Post for our no ban list modern quarterfinals. Here we go. So many Eldrazi. Can Miracles actually do it and stop it? That's going to be the fun question to watch, as a Cloud Post, which his banned people, is how we're going to start.
Yeah, you know how you make the most busted deck in Modern's history more busted? Add more banned cards.
Yeah, add more ban and more mana.
I'm not saying Ayavugan is the biggest mistake that Wizards of the Coast has ever made. I'm just saying this is the no banless Modern format, and by far the best deck is an Ayavugan deck. By far.
Anneliese on a mulligan of 6, going to play a Chalice of the Void for 1, and that can shut down a lot of Brian's cards, and it's going to resolve. So now life probably gets a little bit more difficult for old BBD.
Oh, for sure. He doesn't have a lot of ways to get this off the battlefield, and his deck does contain quite a few one-mana cards. He hasn't necessarily been struggling with Eldrazi during this tournament. He had 3 losses and a draw coming into the top 8, 2 of which were against Eldrazi. However, he's played against it 7 times, which means he's beaten it 5 of those 7 times. And there's a world where he ends up playing against it 10 total times if he makes it to the finals.
Thought Not Seer is going to resolve. You'll take a look at Brian's hand. There's a mental misstep. Actually, let's make it 2 of those. Oh, the Sensei's Divine Top looks like a Monastery Mentor. Dig Through Time, and you guessed it, Detention Sphere.
So my gut tells me that Brian probably should have cast a 1-mana spell on his turn, no matter what it was, just to maybe help fuel Dig Through Time. In this stage of the game, locked under Chalice, yes, he does have a Detention Sphere, but if this happens and you aren't able to put the Detention Sphere to get rid of the Chalice, you need to be able to cast that Dig Through Time. I actually expected Anneliese in this spot to take the Detention Sphere because it looks like to be the only way that Brian has to get Chalice off the battlefield.
Well, depending on how aggressive Anneliese's draw is, we'll see if that is a mistake or not. Does have access to 4 mana, does Faustino, and a 4/4 on the battlefield. Probably going to have access to more next turn, given the deck that she is playing. So we head back over to Brian, who searched up a Hallowed Fountain, and now will draw a card. Does he have land number 3?
Now, Brian actually has a tough decision here. He drew a Scalding Tarn for the turn, which means he gets to unlock the Detention Sphere in his hand, but he has a really tough choice. If he takes Thought Not Seer, he's able to draw a card off of it and clear the battlefield. But if he takes the Chalice of the Void, he gets to unlock Sensei's Top as well as every other 1-mana card in his hand.
Well, he is going to take the Chalice of the Void off of the battlefield, so Anneliese gets to keep the Thought Not Seer. Perhaps a Reality Smasher will be coming next.
A 5th land and a Reality Smasher here would be very bad for Brian. He has 2 copies of Supreme Verdict in his deck, but he would need to draw that plus a land, which, frankly is impossible to do.
Also that 1 copy of Terminus that's running around in his deck too.
Yeah.
We can't forget about that. Brian's did tell us a little bit earlier in the weekend when he got paired against Eldrazi. He's found his way into that Terminus a couple of times here this weekend, as there's a couple copies of Eldrazi Mimic and now a Walking Ballista for 1. We'll go back over to Brian Braun-Duin. Now would be a good time for that Terminus, but it does not show up for BBD. Looks like he picked up a Path to Exile instead.
Yeah, and I think a fine play here. He has to be a little careful. Anneliese is stuck on 4 lands. She might have a Reality Smasher in hand, but Brian's also stuck on mana. I could see a world where Brian wants to gamble a little bit, main phase this Path to Exile on the Thought Not Seer, draw a card and try to hit that land drop so that he's able to play Sensei's Divining Top, start looking for things like Supreme Verdict and Terminus.
And there's a top. And he's thinking about spinning that top, but he's going to slow himself down a little bit here, will Brian. Again, Brian right now has 2 copies of Mental Misstep in hand, which is not ideal in this matchup. So you could say that those are 2 mulligans, potentially. And it looks like Brian will spin the top. Now, you got to remember, folks, Brian Braun-Duin, he has won a Legacy Grand Prix with Sensei's Divining Top in his deck, Grand Prix, New Jersey, a handful of years ago. Brian is so used to playing with Sensei's Divining Top. This must be a lot of fun for him this weekend, getting to do this again. And he's assembled top plus counterbalance many a time this weekend. And we'll see if he can do it again in this matchup and have it be effective. So we'll go back over to Anneliese.
Quick correction. I do not believe Brian was playing counterbalance and top in that tournament. I believe he was playing Young Pyromancer, Stoneforge Mystic Treasure Cruise. He beat Tom Ross in the finals.
He did beat Tom in the finals.
Infect. I know that Treasure Cruise was legal, and during that format, he 100% was playing Treasure Cruise, Young Pyromancer, Stoneforge Mystic. Now, whether or not he had those in the sideboard, I don't recall. That is a fairly powerful option to contain things like Ad Nauseam Storm combo, for example.
Sure. Anneliese is going to search up a waste. The Thought-Knot Seer, that bit the dust. It's only going to be an activation of Walking Ballista to deal a little bit more damage. So if you're Brian, you got to be thrilled with this. You know, don't get punished too bad. No Reality Smasher, no follow-up Thought-Knot Seer, nothing like that when the shields were down. So we go back over to Brian Braun-Duin. Brian will draw a card.
It's a 4th land, so now it unlocks Supreme Verdict if he's able to draw it. He's getting to a precariously low life total. The Walking Ballista has him effectively at 2 fewer life points. I believe he should be at 8, but we'll get that checked out in just a moment.
I'm going back over to Faustino, who now has an Eldrazi Temple.
Players in the 3 p.m. standard challenge.
Anneliese has access to 7 mana if it's an Eldrazi spell, 6 mana if it's not, 1 Cloud Post, 2 wastes, Eldrazi Temple.
There's a Snapcaster Mage. Now here's a Path to Exile.
This will be interesting to see if Anneliese does actually want to take care of the Snapcaster before block, so it can't trade with potentially the Eldrazi Mimic.
Looks like Walking Ballista is going to add a counter. In response to that, Brian's going to fire off a Path to Exile.
And with no more copies of Waste in Anneliese's deck, I believe she correctly decides to do 1 damage to Brian as opposed to searching for nothing.
Matter Shaper is going to be the follow-up there. And now we're going to go back to Brian. Brian may fetch here, and he will. So he's going to fall down to 4. Not a lot of life to work with here for BBD. As he'll fetch, he'll get a land, and presumably he will spin the top. No surprise there as he fetches up a basic Plains.
It's fairly dangerous here for Brian. Even if he's able to find a Supreme Verdict at this juncture, Matter Shaper equates to a free card, and that free card could be anything. It could even be a Reality Smasher, which ends the game on the spot.
Anneliese will shuffle. We'll head back BBD's way here after he gets to take a little look-ski-poo with the top. So top 3 cards here for Brian. Remember, he does play 1 main deck copy of Terminus. Looks like he found a Counterbalance within those cards, but Counterbalance not at its best in this particular matchup.
Oh, for sure. Counterbalance is a lot like Chalice of the Void, and that usually it's countering cheap spells, along with Sensei's Divining Top and how you build the curve of your deck. Counterbalance can't easily counter expensive things. Sometimes you can get lucky and reveal something like Jace the Mind Sculptor, but that's pretty difficult.
Looks like the Path to Exile that was recast by Brian needs to be exiled. Looks like he may have accidentally left it in his graveyard, so it looks like we've got that all fixed now. That's why we do have a quick judge call here in the feature match area. And now Brian, it looks like, okay, on his upkeep is going to cast Dig Through Time.
And as much as it feels like drawing a card, casting Dig Through Time is not. So if this next card is randomly Terminus, that takes care of the Matter Shaper and the Eldrazi Mimic, and the Matter Shaper doesn't have that die triggered. This is more of a clear the top 3 cards, though, than anything. Brian knew the top 3. He didn't really want any of them. So he's going to cast this Dig Through Time in hopes that he gets to refresh that draw and see some better cards off of Sensei's Divining Top.
Brian will draw. Was hoping for a Terminus. Didn't find one. See if he has a 5th land to play here or not.
If I'm not mistaken, he did take one off of the Dig Through Time to make sure that he was able to hit a land this turn so he could spin top and potentially draw Terminus. Although Path to Exile could save him from lethal damage this turn as well.
We'll head back over to Anneliese. It's an attack for lethal. Brian will start by sacrificing a Scalding Tarn. He'll go fetching, and he might go spinning, folks. We'll see. He will go spinning. BBD needs a little help.
Yeah, things do tend to get a little bit better after sideboard for Brian. He's able to get things like Counterbalance out of his deck, Mental Misstep out of his deck. These are cards that you really want in blue matchups or degenerate combo matchups. After sideboard, he gets access to Ceremonious Rejection, which counters most things in Anneliese's deck, as well as things like Disenchant to help take care of Chalice of the Void, which lock out a lot of his spells.
Is Terminus in there? That is the question. It is not, and we are all done. So, Anneliese Faustino is going to win game number 1 here over Braun-Duin. Eldrazi Post going to win game number 1 here over Miracles. These players will get the opportunity to go to their sideboards. It is best 2 out of 3 here in this particular tournament, as opposed to best 3 out of 5, as we saw in the Invitational. So they'll get deckless, they'll scope things out, and we'll do the same here after these commercials. We are back, getting ready to watch game number 2 here between Anneliese Faustino and Braun-Duin. It's Eldrazi Post and Miracles. BBD does lose game number 1 to Eldrazi Post, so we will start with him and his sideboard of 3 Ceremonious Rejection, along with 2 Celestial Purge, 2 Disenchant, 2 Surgical Extraction, and a couple of one-ofs here in Dispel, Gut Shot, Engineer Explosives, Runed Halo, Negate, and Pithing Needle. Todd.
So I've talked to Brian about this deck quite a bit and this matchup quite a bit because it's been so prevalent in this tournament. He really likes citing out the middle missteps and the counterbalances in favor of things like Ceremonious Rejection, which are 1-mana counter spells for virtually anything that Anneliese could throw at him. 2 Disenchants to help clean up things like Chalice of the Void, which you've already discussed. I think the Gut Shot is okay. One of the easiest ways for Annelise's deck to run Brian over is with an early Eldrazi Mimic, and Gut Shot just kind of takes care of that problem. Free Spell is also very powerful with Gut Shot, so I could see an early draw from Anneliese featuring multiple Eldrazi Mimics to get cleaned up by Gut Shot plus Snapcaster Mage nicely. And then finally, Runed Halo is just a fine answer to the more large, annoying creatures out of Eldrazi.
For Anneliese, 2 Dismember, 2 Gut Shot, 2 Grafdigger's Cage, 2 Surgical Extraction, 2 Ratchet Bomb, 2 Warping Whale, 2 Witchbane Orb, and it was always Jite. Don't know if she has to change much. What do you think?
Oh, no, not a whole lot. She might want to bring in the Dismembers just to help keep things like Monastery Mentor in check. That's going to be the easiest way for her to lose the game. If Brian's ever able to sweep the board with a Supreme Verdict or a Terminus and then follow that up on the next turn with Monastery Mentor plus make a token or 2, it can get out of control quickly. I don't think she has many dead cards in her deck, though, so it's going to be hard to find room for those 2 copies of Dismember.
Oh, those are the configurations there, potentially for both players. You've seen access to the 15 cards they took a look at for the sideboard. Now they'll take a look at 7 for their opening hands, and we'll see if each player can keep, as Brian, again, will be on the play. Anneliese will keep as well, and they'll be given the green light. We're about to be underway. Brian going to start things off with an untapped Hallowed Fountain and a Ponder. He'll take a look at the top couple of cards here. We'll see if Brian wants to keep any of these or if he'd like to shuffle them away and draw a mystery card.
So when Counterbalance was in Legacy alongside Sensei's Divining Top, it was fairly common in matchups where your counterbalances were bad to sideboard them out. So even though Counterbalance is probably no longer in Brian's deck, Sensei's Divining Top is still very good. It helps you smooth your draws, find very specific answers to very weird problems, and when you have to deal with large creatures and Chalice of the Void, having something like Sensei's Divining Top still in your deck is more than fine, even when you don't have that 2-card combo.
Faustino going to start things off with just a Cloud Post. Brian with an Island and another Ponder. So Brian going to look to set up his hand, and while he does that, let you know a couple of results here. Chris Lynch with Green-Black Dark Depths going to beat Cortland Strudel and the Eldrazi deck 2-0. So number 1 overall seed is moving on, as there's a Sensei's Divining Top. You got Cody Goodwin with Eldrazi up a game here over Kevin Long playing depth. White Eldrazi down a game here to Aiden Breyer, as the top gets misstepped. Vesuva gonna copy a Cloud Post, and now here is a Kaboom Ratchet Bomb.
Ratchet Bomb's kind of an interesting card here. It's possible that Anneliese overvalued the strength of Counterbalance, or she just really fears Monastery Mentor, and either of those could have been a reason to bring in Ratchet Bomb. If Ratchet Bomb is able to tick up to 3, Brian's primary Wing Condition and Monastery Mentor is going to be locked down. But also, if Brian just plays a Jace the Mind Sculptor, Anneliese can choose to take up to 4 and then untap and pop it.
Here's a Monastery Mentor. Ratchet Bomb's going to go up to 1. Monastery Mentor does have the ability to close out games very, very quickly for Brian's deck. So we'll see how long this sticks around, assuming it does it all. Anneliese access to 4 mana right now. Vesuva did copy Cloud Post, so 2 Locusts on the battlefield. And this could be a big turn for Anneliese, depending on how much mana becomes available. Glimmer Post would certainly change the equation quite a bit.
Yeah, Glimmer Post here gives her access to 7 mana and goes up 3 life, which could end up mattering in a racing situation against Monastery Mentor.
Whoa. Just passing. I am surprised. I don't know what Annaliese's hand could be if it's just passing the turn.
I honestly don't know either, but it's possible she overvalued the strength of Ratchet Bomb. It's possible that she kept Ratchet Bomb Middle Misstep and then a bunch of mana. We see the colorless Eldrazi decks that currently exist in Modern very oftentimes keep 5 and 6 land hands just because they have access to Tron on turn 3. And that often leads to flooding. But the first time you draw one of your big spells, you immediately catch back up because you have such a huge mana advantage. And that may be what we're seeing here.
Arid Mesa going to search up just the basic planes here. Don't forget Brian's got that Field of Ruin on the battlefield, so can blow up and break up the Cloud Post advantage here a little bit if he'd like to. But I got a feeling he might want to cast some spells here, folks. And if he does that, start to generate some monks and maybe kill Anneliese very, very quickly.
Yep, I feel like Brian here is going to probably main face Field of Ruin and then try to cast 2 spells. Or just task 4 and plays one of the best cards of all time in Jace the Mind Sculptor. Yet somehow it's unplayable in current Modern.
Jace looks plenty good right now.
Yeah, no joke.
The Mind Sculptor has resolved. Brian going to figure out how he wants to use the powerful card. Of course, got a Monk token there as well from Monastery Mentor. And he's going to start, by Fate Sealing, which I think makes some sense. If Anneliese didn't do anything last turn, leads you to believe that she probably doesn't have much going on in hand.
Right. I mean, if she had Dismember, she would have cast it immediately. Her hand, could very easily just contain more copies of Mental Misstep and these reactive cards when what she really needs is a big proactive spell this turn.
Well, we've got a pretty good glimpse of the hand right now, and it is actually just all lands and now an Endbringer. And Jace don't care about no Endbringer.
No. Jace being able to bounce now at 5 loyalty from the tick up, it's going to be able to contain that Endbringer quite nicely. But Brian does need to cast some spells in a hurry before that Ratchet Bomb is able to take care of the Monastery Mentor.
Well, there is the Endbringer. That will resolve. It looks like there may be a follow-up here. And there will be, and it's actually another copy of Ratchet Bomb, and that can actually keep the tokens from Monastery Mentor, the monks, in check. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and before anyone flips out, she had a mana floating, using the Cavern to make sure the Endbringer was uncounterable, just in case there was some weird disrupting shoal nonsense going on. But, the mana floating, she has 6 from the 2 Cloud Posts, 7 from the Cavern of Souls, and then the 8th from the Glimmer Post.
Brian now going to do a little brainstorming action here with Jace the Mind Sculptor. This is where Jace generally takes over games. You'll find it happen a lot in Legacy. You don't see it so much right now in current Modern, but it looks like that's going to be happening in No Bandless Modern. Brian going to be putting 2 cards back, maybe even putting a fetch land with it to make it a nice little brainstorm.
Yeah, using the brainstorm ability there on Jace signifies one of 2 things to me. Either Brian has a Path to Exile to deal with this Endbringer and just wants some more gas, or has absolutely nothing going on in hand and desperately needs to find some ways to trigger this Monastery Mentor while also crossing his fingers and hoping he finds a Path to Exile.
Well, our question has been answered. Path to Exile is going to take care of Endbringer. Anneliese is going to search up a Wastes. And that'll solve that problem. Brian will also get another Monk token. Again, those Monk tokens will likely be checked by that second Ratchet Bomb. Brian now going to follow up here with a Sensei's Divining Top. So another Monk token from former Invitational champion Jacob Wilson. As there's a Sensei's Divining Top that has resolved. And now the Mentor and the active Monk token will come into the red zone.
If I'm Anneliese, I am more than happy taking this damage from the Monk token. You might see a less experienced player here just pop that Ratchet Bomb to prevent the Monk token damage, clearing out the other 2 Monks. But Anneliese is trying to make sure she clears everything off the battlefield by getting that Ratchet Bomb up to 3 to kill the Mentor, as well as making sure she can clear every single token once the Mentor is gone.
Good old Disenchant. Good old school Disenchant. Going to take care of that Ratchet Bomb. Don't have to be fancy all the time here in Magic, folks. You can just play a card from the very early stages of Magic that's been reprinted a bunch, and it's more than good enough as it takes care of that Ratchet Bomb that was moving up to 3 counters. Now here is a Chalice of the Void. That one is going to be just for 1, and we'll see if this does resolve or not. And it will.
Yeah, I think Brian here in a commanding lead just because he has Jace on the battlefield. These Monk tokens are a little more menacing, are a little less menacing than they actually look. The Ratchet Bomb can basically sweep them all in one go. But Brian can rebuild pretty easily with the fresh cards off of Jace the Mind Sculptor. Even if they're getting countered by Chalice of the Void, he still gets the triggers and makes Monks.
So Brian will untap all those lands, those Monk tokens as well, along with the Monastery Mentor, the Monk Generator. Spin the top at the end of the turn, did Brian, so we'll see him maybe spin top on this turn, and of course we'll see him use Jace in some fashion. The question is, will it be brainstorming or Fate Sealing? I find it very unlikely he wants to bounce anything, so he will go towards the Fate Seal. Take a look here. Brian says, that one's going to go to the bottom, thank you. It's time to attack for 6 total damage, and is it time to blow that Ratchet Bomb is the question.
I think no. I think you can be a little more patient. You're in some trouble, but you're only going to 9. Don't panic. Wait one more turn. Popping the Ratchet Bomb for 0 also clears away her Chalice of the Void too, so that's definitely something to keep in mind.
This will be a Cloud Post enters the battlefield tapped and just a passing the turn. So Anneliese Faustino is not finding anything to do right now. And now Brian might be able to force the activation of a Ratchet Bomb as he's starting to tap a little bit of mana here. Perhaps he will dig through time. Yes.
He's going to exile a couple cards out the graveyard here, cast this Dig Through Time, get some Monk token, and he's looking for Snapcaster Mage to flash back the Disenchant, or just more things to trigger Monastery Mentor. Whenever the Jace Mind Sculptor in play starts ticking up on the opponent, that's usually a very bad thing, because that means they do not need to have a free Brainstorm.
Well, Brian is doing just fine by resolving Dig Through Time as he untaps all those Monk tokens once again and all those lands. He will spin top potentially on the upkeep, and he will. So he used the planes to do it. Take a look at the top couple of cards, increase the quality of his draw step to the best of his ability. And then we're going to go back to Brian for his first main phase, where perhaps we'll see him use Jace the Mind Sculptor.
And Brian here, to force Anneliese to pop the Ratchet Bomb, just needs to cast a single instant or sorcerer, non-creature spell to trigger the prowess. And that'll take care of the Ratchet Bomb. And then Brian can just rebuild his entire side of the battlefield, monks and all, with 2 copies of Sensei's Divining Top. Since it kind of creates this loop with Sensei's Top, you can just go off, essentially. You don't gain any card advantage per se, but every mana you spend creates a monk and pumps your entire team.
Brian says that top card, put that one to the bottom too, please and thank you. So Anneliese is going to use a Cavernous Souls and a Waste to be able to play an Eldrazi Mimic. Pretty poor creature right now, unfortunately for her. As you saw last turn, Brian didn't play a spell to make his Monk tokens and Monastery Mentor any larger, which means all that damage got the opportunity to come through. Anneliese fell down to 2, which means Monastery Mentor can be lethal by itself. And if Brian assumes that Anneliese has nothing going on, we could see something very simple here, Todd, and just bounce your Eldrazi Mimic, attack with all my creatures.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the play for Brian. He also has access to Detention Sphere in hand. So either of those options I think is more than fine.
Well, here is the Detention Sphere. You'll get a trigger for Prowess and Monk tokens. Take care of the Eldrazi Mimic, and we are all done. As Braun-Duin's going to win game number 2 here over Anneliese Faustino. Miracles, Eldrazi Post's going to get ready for a third and final one. We'll take a look at the sideboards one more time, but first, a few messages from our sponsors. Game number 3 about to be underway here between Anneliese Faustino and Braun-Duin, Eldrazi Post, and Miracles. Going to finish sideboarding up all these players, and so we'll update you one more time on our bracket for those of you just joining us. First and foremost, glad to have you. Second, we're having some fun here this evening with no ban list Modern, our quarterfinals, where Chris Lynch with Green-Black Dark Depths able to take down Cortland Strode playing Eldrazi. So your number 1 overall seed is going to move on to play the winner of this match between Braun-Duin and Anneliese Faustino. Then the other side of the bracket, number 2 overall seed Kevin Long and number 7 overall seed Cody Goodwin. That's Green-Black Depths against Colorless Eldrazi. They're going and actually playing game number 3 right now. And then our other match between Gino Brown, number 3 overall seed, and Aiden Breyer, number 6 overall seed. That's White Eldrazi, which for Gino. And Aiden's got Colorless Eldrazi. They're also in game number 3. So if you're a fan of the Eldrazi, this is the tournament and the stream for you, because we can't get away from them.
The only possibility of having a match that doesn't contain an Eldrazi deck is if Brian wins this match. Otherwise, it's going to be only Depths versus Eldrazi or Eldrazi Mirrors for the rest of the tournament. And that is the hell. That is no banless Modern.
That's right.
Nothing but turn 2 Thought Not Seers for the rest of your life.
And some people thought that Hypergenesis was going to be too good. Shame on you.
I mean, with so many ways to keep it in check in this format and just more consistent combo decks that usually can win at about the same speed as Hypergenesis, it's possible that it's not even that good. Would I take it off the ban list? Of course not. There's no upside. It's all bad.
No.
But maybe it's not that good.
This is a Glimmer Post to start things off. Anneliese going to gain a little bit of life to get game number 3 underway as we head back over to Brian. Both players keeping 7, it appears.
This tournament reminds me a lot of when we do the fun stuff on the Versus series where we play like old extended decks versus like current standard decks just to see how these decks would match up.
Yeah.
And we had a gauntlet run where we put Teamer Energy a la Glorybringer, Whirler Virtuoso, Rogue Refiner, etc. Through the ringer against the likes of Cawblade, just super powerful standard decks over the last 10 years. And Cawblade was the only deck that beat it. Like Jeskai Black lost somehow, even though it has Crackling Doom to beat Bristling Hydra.
Yeah, that's actually surprising.
You just can't beat Whirler Virtuoso at pre-board. You just need Radiant Flames. It's ridiculous. But no banless Modern feels like, you're getting the band back together, and you're all up to no good. You know, you're going out, you're smashing some glass bottles on the ground. You're getting thrown in the back of the police truck.
It's all bad.
It's all bad.
You're just out here causing a bunch of trouble. Mental misstep. Nothing fair about that. Got to take care of Sensei's Divining Top at the cost of 2 life. Anneliese now down to 19. What a punishment. As now here's a Field of Ruin, and might have another top here from Brian.
It also might be a Pithy Needle. For 1 colorless mana, Brian does have one in his sideboard, and he could have brought that in, which looks like he did.
Yep, there is Pithy Needle. We'll see what this is going to name. Could be Walking Ballista, but we'll get confirmation from our table spotter and our team when we have a moment as we head back over to Anneliese Faustino.
With Cloud Posts, Anneliese is actually way more likely than most of these colorless Eldrazi decks to actually be able to activate her Eye of Ugin. Because of Cloud Posts and all these extra mana sources, activating Eye of Ugin is not a pipe dream. And there is a potential that Brian thought maybe the game would go long. Any redundant Eye of Ugins end up being good because he has a Field of Ruin the first one. But naming Walking Ballista is a fairly easy name just because it's so good against Monastery Mentor when you have access to a lot of mana.
A couple of cards here in Brian's hand from this Thought Knot. So you see the Ruined Halo, Path to Exile. You also see that Disenchant yet again, along with a Flooded Strand and a Scalding Tarn, which means Brian gets a lot of looks at it with all the shuffles, though he doesn't have a top just yet. So Brian will draw.
No, but he does have Field of Ruin to keep this Cloud Post in check. With Glimmer Post ×2 and 1 other land, which would be a waste off the Field of Ruin, it cuts Anneliese down from 5 mana, potentially 6, from 3 mana to potentially 4.
Yeah, which I think will be pretty important. You do want to keep these Glimmer Posts in check, or more importantly, these Cloud Posts. Just knock the Locusts down as Brian's going to sacrifice a Scalding Tarn.
Yeah, and he could just be going for a Field of Ruin play here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hate this play at all, constricting her mana, and also if she just doesn't have another mana source in hand, 3 is not where the Eldrazi deck wants to be. 4 is the sweet spot.
Anneliese will search up a waste there. So now Brian's got a Plains available. Keep in mind, Ruined Halo, Disenchant in hand, and 1 mystery card. Anneliese knows the rest.
Ruined Halo, not the card you want against a Thought Knot Seer. It's already stripped a card from you. You would much rather find a way to make it leave the battlefield so you actually need to draw that card back. Ooh. But at the same time, it is a 4/4, and it's going to start applying a lot of pressure to Brian.
Muzawa's Jite the draw.
That's a nice one. Brian does have Disenchant to keep it in check.
There's another waste. And now here's an attack for 4.
If I'm not mistaken, her hand has a Mimic and a Jite and a Ratchet Bomb.
Not a bad hand. I imagine Anneliese would like a little bit more pressure.
Yeah, something like a Reality Smasher here and a 5th mana next turn. Something key, she did draw her 2nd Wastes. So if Brian draws a future Field of Ruin or a Path to Exile, that'll be a clean answer. There won't be any lands searched for on Annelise's side.
Brian very quickly sacrificing that Flooded Strand to go get a basic island.
What could it be? It's either Jace or Supreme Verdict. That's it.
Yep.
And he did it so fast, I'm pretty sure it's Verdict.
A very quick fetch there from BBD, so it looks like he's got a plan here. And he's tapping 4 mana, and it is Supreme Verdict to clean up those Eldrazi, and more importantly, draw a card. Brian, of course, will be drawing because Thought Knot Seer did bite the dust. Now we head back over to Anneliese, who will put a counter on that Ratchet Bomb. Back over to Faustino, we're going to go. A waste the draw.
3 wastes? Was I just crazy? Every other colorless Eldrazi list I saw only had 2. She had 3, but she drew the 3rd one. Maybe she has 4. Up is down, left is right.
Faustino with, make sure we get this right here, exactly 3 wastes.
Meat is potatoes.
Walking Ballista going to come down. It's a 2/2. So blowing up that Cloud Post, pretty ideal there for Brian. Keep in mind that Pithy Needle on BBD's side is naming Walking Ballista. Ratchet Bomb is on 1, so it can, of course, blow up the needle if Anneliese would like to. See if she ever gets around to doing that as we're going to head back over to BBD.
Yeah, I see a Jace the Mind Sculptor hanging out in Brian's hand. I'm not sure exactly what he wants to do with it. If he plays it, ticks down to bounce the Walking Ballista, Anneliese can actually pop the Ratchet Bomb, kill the Pithy Needle, and then use the 2 counters from Walking Ballista to finish off the Jace since it minus. If Brian ticks up, Anneliese gets to do the same thing with the Ratchet Bomb, except on her turn, spend 4 mana, add add a counter while attacking. Brian going for the safe play, just trying to clear all the threats from Anneliese so he can stick this Jace the Mind Sculptor.
A little surprising there to see the supreme verdict, but he's going to play the most expensive thing to get that Walking Ballista off the battlefield, and now the coast is relatively clear for it. Jace the Mind Sculptor, better than all, except for Teferi, not better than Teferi.
I would love if Brian played safe here and actually ticked up Jace and took a look at Annaliese's top card. Reality Smasher here would be disastrous. And as long as it's not Reality Smasher, I think he's able to contain basically everything else.
Well, and Brian says you can have that card on top. I don't mind it no matter what it is, except for Reality Smasher. Chalice of the Void, sure. I have a disenchant for that. And if you want to set it for 2, most of my deck is actually on 1. So Ratchet Bomb is going to blow up the needle. And will Chalice of the Void come down? It will. And it's going to be just for 1, I believe. Yes, which, again, Brian can answer this pretty easily with the disenchant. So we will head back over to BBD. More importantly is his ability to keep it rocking and rolling with Jace here, and that's exactly what he's going to get to do, Todd.
So, yes, Chalice of the Void on 1 shuts off a lot of Brian's cards. But with Annalise having the information that Brian has disenchant, I think I might have leaned towards playing Chalice of the Void for 2. If only because not only does that shut off the disenchant proper, it also takes care of all the Snapcaster Mages in Brian's hand, and at that point, the only card he really has to get the Chalice of the Void off the battlefield, Detention Sphere. And he only has 2 copies of those. Annalise could have played her Umezawa Jite before that, though, to make sure that it didn't get countered by the Chalice of the Void.
It's a big old endless one. It's going to get rejected by Ceremonious Rejection. We're going to head back over to Brian now. He's going to spin the top, and Annalise is in some real trouble now because Jace the Mind Sculptor plus Sensei's Divine Top are going to allow Brian to draw a really good card every turn as Jace is going to move on up to 9.
Normally in this spot, you would think that the Miracles player is looking to draw some cards with Brainstorm to lock things up. Brian just ticking straight up. He thinks he's already got it locked up. Maybe he has Snapcaster Mage Ceremonious Rejection?
Well, Mental Misstep was the draw there for Faustino, and that one's not going to help very much because Brian's got what he needs already on the battlefield, and it looks like he may have just found a copy of Dig Through Time in those top 3 cards. So he will set it, and now he will draw a card. And Jace is going to go on up to 11. And this is what people expected to have happen in Modern. Take control of the game, do this, they lose. It hasn't happened yet. Teferi's been taking control of games, not Jace the Mind Sculptor. This is more like it, folks.
Yeah, I think the more degenerate a format becomes, the better Jace's, just because control decks normally get more powerful answers.
It's a weird thing to say, but it's hard to argue. As here's a Dig Through Time now for Brian Braun-Duin. He will delve away 4 cards, take a look at the top 7, of course take 2 along with him, and then I think we're going to see him untap and go back to Jacing the Eldrazi post deck.
Now this one, this is one of the reasons why Jace was banned in the first place. Not only is it fairly oppressive with the card advantage engine that you can cobble together, but at the same time, it wins games by, a feel-bad means. The plus from Jace makes sure that the thing you're drawing each turn is not effective. And when you're already low on resources, low on action, just making sure that you draw like a land every turn is just kind of sad.
Well, that is going to do it. Brian Braun-Duin is going to win this match here over Annalise Faustino. 2-1. Miracle is going to take care of Eldrazi Poston for BBD. He keeps on getting the job done there with Miracles over Eldrazi. And guess
2.